I'm Chad Mosier. I am a PhD level clinical psychologist working at Palo Verde as clinical director and have been working as a mental health provider in this community since 2004. Worked a lot with children and adolescents and young adults in all sorts of stages of their life and needs.
My name is Gabriela Huber. I work at Palo Verde Behavioral Health, running the adolescent group as an outpatient program, and I am an LAC, a licensed associate counselor from NAU, and I've been in the Tucson area for about 4 years. But I focus a lot of my career, and what led me to the mental health field was my interest and experience with my own child with ADHD and other behavioral and mental health conditions. So I have some experience working with them, and I try always to work with the kids in the group and trying to see where they're coming from, especially the cultural aspects that they bring and how that influences their well-being and the mental health. I will say what I'm seeing is that kids are getting too comfortable online. So their lives have shifted. They don't feel the need to socialize anymore in person. So they've shifted a lot. And so parents are trying to push to do the other things, and it's not happening. So there's a lot of resistance for that. And many times they are reflecting parents' feelings and emotions about the pandemic. So if the parent is calm and like put your mask and just keep doing what you're doing, they will do that. But if the parent is like, no, wash your hands, do this, don't do that, don't go there, put your mask. Oh my God, you forgot your mask. So they will just we model for the kids. So if we have high anxiety about the pandemic, they will have the same anxiety or even more.
I agree with Gabriela, and I would add that anytime there's an issue going on in the world that affects us, there's difficulty in making sense of it. And I think because kind of going off of the parent modeling and adult modeling, we don't know what the long-term effects are. And I think that translates down into a confusion of, well, why bother? Well, what's my future going to be? And it creates this different level of anxiety that we probably haven't seen in decades. Um, Leading up to the pandemic, there were lots of concerns that young people had about environmental issues or political future. Those are kind of typical adolescent concerns. This added to that levels of, I don't understand what's happening in this world, or why do we have to do these things? And I think it causes an additional level of anxiety. So anything that we can do to model helping understand this pandemic, understand how we have to get through this together, that's really important to model.
Especially if you've had a kid that used to do everything that was more compliant, and you see like a lot of saying no to a lot of things. Many times it comes from fear of whatever is that they have to face. Kids that are tend to be anxious may become more not angry but easily upset and get like irritable. So if it's too much to the point that there are fights all the time, like no wanting to do work or no wanting to do certain things that they used to do, kind of like look at that with with a different set of eyes, trying to see if this is something that your child was getting to, like it was more like an increment of whatever was the baseline, or is something completely different. So if it's like just a shift of very different aspect of the personality, that could be problematic.
I agree with that, and think about the levels of social isolation that have also happened. I think if there are some adolescents who are changing their social engagement, evaluating that, whether is this a normal reaction, is this an abnormal reaction, and really getting some input and maybe even checking in with that child or adolescent more often. Um, to make sure that the social isolation of having been home for so long doesn't become the normal routine again for that person. And because depression can look different for everyone, and part of that is too much social isolation or cutting people out. It's also pretty regular to have challenges in friendship groups, especially during these tense times, or inability to really communicate and see each other. And so the additional part to that is making sure that they're not completely cutting their friends out more than usual or more dramatically than usual. So if there's changes in friendships or um, ability or interest in engaging with other people, that's something to check out. One go to I think about is engaging them in easy activities at home together. So, particularly for some adolescent boys, they respond well to not directly talking about it, but if you engage them in an activity, something parallel together, something cooperative together, that often will allow people to begin talking without being talking directly together. Another trick that we sometimes do with folks is to engage in car therapy or car talking time, where if you're with them in the car and you have a little bit of music on and you just begin to talk gently about the challenging topics, it may kind of perk some new conversation, particularly if they're feeling less threatened and it's less directed at them, like they did something wrong. Sure, come fold the laundry, um, come help me bake cookies, let's make pasta together, can you help me chop these vegetables? And then in that doing together can often come a bit of conversation that you can sneak in there.
I'll say like a pattern, starting maybe with something little and not wanting to engage with the parent, and just and it's tricky to see that, because kids, as they become older, adolescents, they want more privacy, and then it can be easily confused with isolation. So kind of like always engage with them and have limits and routines. I think that is very important, so they also know what to expect. And expectations is everything. If you set the expectation that the electronics, well, end at certain hour, and we have one meal together, even though we're all day together in the house, then you have those opportunities, like Chad was saying, to interact with them. And sometimes even table games, like say one positive thing, one negative, and one neutral from your day, because there are interactions in online schooling. And sometimes the teachers leave the Zoom rooms open and they interact, and but nobody knows, because it's kind of like it's always in the room, the door is closed, and having that time to for them to keep doing different things, because what is happening is like they're just sitting in that room or table, whatever, by themselves all day, and nobody notices, because they're older. They can, if they're hungry, they can go there and get something to eat. Nobody notices they're doing that. And the other thing is like they stop eating regularly, so it becomes very disorganized. And that's what I've observed in my own house. Like the food is always, there's always something going on with little snacks instead of meals, and that can become kind of like a pattern then. Disorderly eating, you just don't eat meals, I'm not hungry, and it starts creating problems between the family members, brothers, sisters, and parents. So that will be for me, to keep a routine, to make sure that there's no patterns of they're different than what it used to be. So
I would look for signs of uh, maybe resistance in engaging in the family. Um, I would think about if they're not able to engage once or twice a week with the whole family, and they're not engaging with friends. That's a big sign of something potentially disturbing within them. Um, there's a natural inability for many adolescents to not be able to talk about what they're feeling or what they're experiencing, and they do need that parental input to help organize these experiences. I also think when there is depression can also look like agitation. So it's not just sadness, there's also potentially agitation, irritation. If they say that everything's awful all the time, if they're just kind of more dramatic than usual, then I think that's another sign like, okay, there's something up, there's something going on.
That's a pet peeve of mine. Again, routines and limits. It's not an online school all day long. There's still sports going on, and even if the sports are not the ones they used to do, like basketball, soccer, where you are like close to each other, um, there's still outside activity, and that is why routines and keeping a semblance of some sort of balance, like life continues even though we're not in the office or we're not at a school. It's important. And the other thing I wanted to mention about like what when kids stop sharing how they feel, sometimes is because they're afraid of judging from their own parents, especially being there's high expectations for them. And if their own parents, they really are these go-getters and pull yourself by the bootstraps, and the kid is more sensitive, then they will not share because they don't see themselves reflected. They see themselves as, I am not as good as my parents, I'm defective. And they will shut down and kind of like keep it all inside because they may feel, and this might not be the case, but that's what they see, that okay, no, I'm so different than my parent, I better just keep it to myself. I'm not going to say anything because they won't understand. And many times it's the opposite, they understand but nobody's talking.
My observation, this generation really does know how to fluidly navigate on and off screens and the different types of screens and the different types of apps that the screens provide. And so, in some way, when you try to control it, they're going to find other ways to do it. Um, and they have clever ways of communicating with each other on how to do that. So, I think that really trusting your instincts as a parent, why are you wanting to limit? Why are you wanting to um, produce a little bit of control or consistency in what you're seeing, even if that's a part of the consequences of your kid doing something squirrely or weird. Um, so I also think about trusting your instincts, but also understanding what the intention is of that consequence. And so if you're wanting to get them to be more outside, then perhaps figuring out some ways with them to go. I've heard of some folks using a wheel, so spinning something to say, okay, this is the activity wheel, or having a sheet of paper and rolling a die and saying, okay, it's the number 8, so therefore the number 6 or whatever it is, and therefore this is what we're going to do today, kind of keeping it random and exciting. Other parents don't have time to do that. So I think it's a lot of challenge of what are you expecting your young person to do, um, and what are the consequences if they don't do it. Um, and if that involves screen time or non-screen time, putting the foot down is going to produce another set of uh, secretive activities that you may not want. And so just keeping in mind like the intent of the consequence or the intent of the screen time rule. Generally, in my experience, I don't know, maybe other people can say something different, but um, the adolescents may put up a little bit of a resistance, but they'll also generally do it, unless, of course, there's some underlying issues there. And then that's what needs to get addressed. And so, going off of that, if you do get a lot of resistance, I would ask directly, in a way, what's going on? Why this much resistance? Like, I say this is the consequence. If you want to negotiate, now's your time. And really trusting that conversation together. Unless it's just inappropriate to have that conversation and it's, if they're being disrespectful, then that's something else.
I will say the hardest thing for parents to do is to validate their own kids and their feelings and emotions, because we try to appear like we know it all and we have the solution for everything. We made it through. We went through this, some of us, horrible childhood experiences, and we made it through. So to understand what they're coming from, like, because we tend to think like, oh, they have a nice private school or they have a nice house and car and things like that. It's like I also have to do that. But like saying like, even though you have everything, this is hard. This is hard for you, and it's hard for me. And letting the kids know that it's hard for us too as parents. That this is not easy. Like living with each other 24/7 and trying to stay apart too. It's like too much of everything together. So, and showing the kids that we're also struggling. That it's not just them. It's important for them to open up and explain, yeah, you know what, I'm not feeling right.
Not being a parent, I can imagine that's hard. I don't know if I would have this sort of reaction, but as a non parent adult working with adolescents, there are some things that I have to say, okay, this is a safe circle. Whatever you say, I will not show a face in any direction. And then it's my responsibility as an adult to model that neutrality, to say, let me hear it, and and be open to it. And it may take 6 times, it may take 8 times, and eventually it may be there. And the stuff that's happening underneath the resistance, um, it may take that person, that young person, to figure it out themselves too. And so being really patient, being really neutral, and also saying, okay, this is a space where what you say, um, we can continue to talk through. And if there are things that I need to react to keep you safe or to make sure that we're in alignment, I will work that out on my own. Until then, can we just be open to talking about it?
That is the thing. What I've tried, and it doesn't happen if, like you were saying, like if you make like, let's talk about this, it just flops like horribly. But if you start watching a movie that it's about those things and teenagers just by yourself, somehow they love the screen and they just come and sit for a little bit and listen some, and that can create like an easy way to talk about things. Many kids just don't say a thing and they just listen. Um, Sometimes just talking about like, what do you know about your friends, or what is like, when I'm more conscious when I drink a glass of wine, and I'm like, am I modeling for him like this is okay to drink wine with dinner? And then we talk about that, like we drink maybe a glass of wine with dinner twice a week, right? This is just having wine with dinner, not drinking like on a Wednesday. And they have then the conversation kind of start about like, do you know what is appropriate? How many drinks do your friends drink? What do you know about them? And then they tell you that they never their friends. Someone in the school did that or has done that, and he heard that this and that, right? So you start hearing like what information they have, and sometimes it just brings another issue of the same type, like smoking or vaping. And some kids are very health conscious, and they do their own research. Um, and sometimes when they engage in this, I would say, risky behaviors of smoking or drinking, sometimes it's not because they're missing something at home. It's because they just want to try, want to experiment. And as parents, we need to provide a safe space to do that, and not create a big issue like experiment. Then let's do it together. Let's see what this is like. Of course, I'm not talking about a 13-year-old, right? I'm talking about a 16 or that age, where they will definitely know about it or heard or even try some, depending where they are at, about drugs and alcohol and sex, even though they won't tell you anything.
Agree that it's a part of life. It's confusing part of life, and taking the mystery out of it is brilliant. Um, and that may have to look different in each family. Every family is so different. Every family has different rules, different requirements. I think that in some ways, finding out what's influencing your child or your young person in your home, or the young people there, the adolescents in there, and thinking about, are there video games that are influencing them? Are there friends that are influencing them? All the regular worries. I think there's just, in this era, particularly with the pandemic, there's so many more ways of being secretive. And so I think taking that mystery out, like the way we might handle it in our groups, is to directly address it. Um, Not the should you or shouldn't you part of the business, but the this is what happens when you, and this is what happens when you. So if it's a substance abuse issue, talking very directly and openly about consequences, health consequences, or choice consequences. The same with sex and sexual activity. Um, the sex is often a relationship negotiation. Um, and so, really, having healthy conversations, or if you're not able to do it or can't do it, finding the right person to do that. So, finding another family member, finding another family friend and neighbor, somebody that you can trust to have conversations, because guaranteed they're asking the wrong people for high end information that is not going to be accurate. Celebrate the small success. Celebrate the fact that there are things you're waking up, you're taking that shower, you're eating a meal, you're engaging with people, and also it's okay to have some freak out moments. Um, I think the challenge that many folks have also been sharing are the challenges of feeling like they're behind in everything that they're doing, when that's the entire world is behind them, or maybe 90% of the world. So I'm not sure what that means. I think we're all trying to navigate what this is. Um, and it probably is confusing because many of us have continued to live the way we live, maybe just with a mask. Um, and other people have had to take different precautions. So maybe I'll redirect the answer to this around, this is also a really good time to talk about differences in people's tolerance, people's acceptance of things like getting up and going to work, and saying, okay, yeah, there are some challenges. Um, there's some confusions. There's some hypocrisies. Adolescents love to point out the hypocrisies. So listen to those hypocrisies. Listen to them. And take note and remember, yeah, probably as an adolescent, you had some finger pointing towards the hypocrisies.
Couple of things. One is, a like Chad was saying, celebrate the small successes. Even when you ask them, the kids always tell you, they come up with the negative first, right? Because it's so heavy on their mind. So maybe it was the last thing that happened, and they're like, "Oh, everything is horrible today," and just go back to, do you wake up on time? Yes. Did you brush your teeth? Yes. Did you have breakfast? Yes. Did you, I don't know, talk to another person? Yes. Okay, so everything is not horrible. There were certain things that you did and you were good at it. Oh, but that's nothing, things that I do every day. Well, those things that we do every day, don't take it for granted, because there are people right now that can't even do that. Get up from their beds. And the other thing is, um, I always try to do small things often, like good things often. Like, if you know of things that make them happy, do more of them. Like if they like cookies baked by you, or a special type of cookie, or a special type of meal, or choosing maybe, bringing some things that they like to do that typically don't get to do because there's a school, or there's like after school activities, and now there's nothing like that. So do more of those things and kind of like put them in, almost like Chad was saying with the rolly thing, right? Okay, so these are all the, especially if there's more than one kid, all the good things that we all like. Let's see who gets to do one, today, and try just to, I mean, it's hard for parents to be these cheerleaders in these times because we are exhausted of providing that support, and we ourselves, we don't want to get out of bed, and we need to show up and really show them that yes, it is hard, but we're still doing this. I know it's hard, it is hard for me, but we're still doing it, and take like a pride on those little things.
Everyone's behind. Everyone is behind, whatever that means. I'm not even sure what that means. I don't know if I agree with it. I think there's a perspective of the messages of being behind, which adds to this perfectionism, competition, um, competitiveness, eagerness. I think that can do a lot of damage to, um, if we want to call it self-esteem or self-worth or just inner identity of who they are as a person. Feeling like we can't do what we're supposed to do and the way we do it makes us feel alienated. So I think really challenging that notion of being behind. No, we're not behind. We adapted really well. And I think the other piece is that we learned as a nation, as a world, I suppose, the power of doing things collectively and together. And so we all had to do this motion together. And I think reminding young folks, like, wow, you are a part of a group. You are a part of a group that has survived this moving forward business. And there's no behind. There's nothing behind about what we're doing. It's hard because if you start that conversation, it can often be this awkward negotiation process. Whereas, honestly, I think I stand with and by and behind parents who make the decision, I just got to bring my kid in. It's a hard decision to make. And you don't have to make that alone. But what's the worst that can happen? Yes, some things can happen if they get brought in, and there's some serious mental health concerns. There are consequences to that, but I think that those consequences are to make sure that that young person, that adolescent, stays safe and remains alive. And so, if you're the bad person because you brought them into the hospital, so be it. In the end, they'll hopefully be able to work through that relationship. I, I, I also think that um, if you do wind up in this power struggle negotiation, I think it's really important to recognize that your adolescent, your person in your life, deserves to have the treatment, the attention from professionals to make it through this tough time. And if they don't want to talk to you, get them to talk to somebody else. If that's a pastor or a priest or a member of the church or a school counselor, anybody that can put the pulse on what's happening with this person.
I will say, definitely, if you're seeing things that are very different from the normal kid you used to have, and she or he is not sharing like what is going on, I will have to kind of like bring it in, like, okay, I see that there is something that is not right, and it's okay that you don't want to talk to me for whatever reason, but we can talk about another day. But you need to talk to someone, and let's see. And sometimes kids don't want to talk to anyone, and that is the challenge what Chad was saying, like negotiating. Okay, if you talk to someone, then this happens. Um, Sometimes it may just take a school counselor, like to ask the school counselor to call on the kid, kind of like I would say look for the back door to call on the kid, and so the kid knows that people are noticing that something is different with them, and maybe that will open a little possibility, like, okay, let's talk to a counselor, let's talk to a therapist, let's see what's going on. um, and so sometimes also with the friends, and I know that as the kids get older, parents kind of like remove themselves a little and they let them do their own friendships. um, but these adolescents, they look at they check on each other, they really do. And I've had the experience of a kid telling me, you know that my friend is not eating. He used to eat lunch, he's not eating anymore, right? And then kind of like go, always have many points of contact. So it's not only just you, know the other parent, know who your kid used to, because they're not hanging out together anymore, or used to hang out together. Talk to the parents, see if they can check with their kids and see if everything is okay. Because they are just between each other among themselves, they share some things and they are more observant and they notice more things that parent that is in a million other things can notice.
If, as a parent, you're feeling that you're stalling and not knowing what to do because your youth is feeling alienated, I would say figure out in yourself if you're also feeling alienated and you're feeling isolated. If you're feeling that way too and you're not knowing what to do with them, then pull back and say, well, let's figure this out together. I think that there's, a lot of people have been accessing community in different and new ways. And so I also suspect that the ease and accessibility of things that had occurred online, um, community centers or community meetings and workshops. I mean, there's all sorts of things that people have accessed online. And when that's no longer available, there's also going to be a sense of loss. And so I just think that acknowledging it, putting a name to it, and then figuring out what that solution is. And as a parent, if you're not able to talk to someone, because likely you're also feeling pretty isolated and alone. If you haven't had contact with coworkers or friends, make some arrangements to do that pretty quickly, or find the community that you need. Fill your cup first, so that when your cup runs over, it spills into your kid's cup. Um, and and talking, just keep talking about it. Find ways of connecting.
I will say just model self-care, as Chad was saying, like they see how you are doing, and if you're not doing well, they will definitely feel, okay, my protector, my parent, the one that knows everything and does everything for me, can't hack it anymore. I'm lost.
Mm.
So, and just self-care, take care of yourself, take time for yourself, do things separately, maintain certain. I know that many families have been able to do like little COVID pods,
Mm.
like you stay together with certain family members or friends, and doing that, keeping that connection at a certain level. And I know that there's like a whole range of fear levels, right? How close can we be? How often do we see each other? Where do we see each other? And I've had experiences with families that I had to, like, it's true. It's like a parent, you have to be a cheerleader. You are the one doing this. Like you're setting up play dates at the park. Let's fly a kite. Let's take the dogs for a walk. Get another kid in the neighborhood that you didn't see. Go on a bike. Go all on a bike. My God, there are no bikes in Tucson now. You can't buy a bike. They are sold out, and because everybody at least is trying. That's a good sign. If they're not doing it, at least they're getting the bikes and they're going out, and the trails are full and people are outdoors. So keeping that kind of like, let's do nothing together in a different place that is not our house.
Yeah, I'm going to add one thing, and that's so I'm speaking to the parents that have adolescents that are comfortable in this isolation and having to return. You're going to expect anxiety. You're going to expect all sorts of pushback with, I don't want to do this, and um, I don't want to go to school and see these people. I don't want to be a part of any of this. And while some of that can be a sign of some bigger issues, I think underneath some of it, most of it is shyness, sensitivities. There's some good books out there about being a highly sensitive person and the ways in which highly sensitive people have to navigate the world is a little bit different than extroverted people or leadership built people, natural leaders. And so recognizing that your adolescent, your teen may just be a highly sensitive person that needs help processing those difficult, big feelings of shyness and introversion. Um, and recognizing that they may need a little bit of extra support and safety in going to school and returning and having a lot of downtime and a lot of time to just lay about and recoup. Um, I also think that people may have some body image issues coming back to school, being in person. Um, we were talking about the long range effects. I don't know if we're going to see increases of disordered eating patterns or body image issues out of nowhere. But I think that's something for us to pay attention to and prevent from happening. Add the cameras just here, and now we're in person.
Yeah.
It's hard.
People that had issues with social anxiety, they're super happy not going
They're
to
very
school.
happy.
They're doing great. And now that the schools, the mandate is to open, they're like, I can't go back. They're now too comfortable. And some parents will have the tendency to, okay, let's wait one more week. Let's wait a couple more days. And I will say with anxiety is that the more you give into the feeling of discomfort, the stronger it gets, right? So if you, okay, don't go today, and then there's, okay, then maybe tomorrow I don't go either. And that is when they start like pushing back and it takes over. Then next time you see, they don't want to go anywhere. Validate the feeling, but to know the feeling doesn't have to lead to a behavior. So understanding like it is hard for them to go back. It's like horrible seeing people in person again and all those insecurities coming back like full, like in one day. But not because of that you're gonna stop going to school. And maybe during the school talk to a counselor and say she may need breaks or he may need breaks, and go into in the counselor's office and work there for a while and kind of like ease their way into it. um, Kind of like ripping the band-aid, but with the steps, not like you're on your own.